It's strange how a single piece of paper can turn your life upside down. I still remember the day I pulled that letter from my mailbox, my hands trembling before I even knew what it said. It had the HOA logo on top, a symbol I had grown to dread. I tore it open, expecting another petty warning about my lawn or mailbox paint. But what I read made my knees go weak. Violation, fine. $12,000 for unapproved window installation. My breath caught in my throat. My windows. The same ones they had approved in writing months ago. The same ones I had taken a loan to pay. For I stood in my driveway, letter in hand, while the sun set behind my house like the closing of a curtain on the life I thought I was building here. I stumbled inside. My wife Sarah waiting at the kitchen table. She was grading her students' essays, her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. The moment she saw my face, she put her pen down. "What happened?" she asked, her voice already laced with worry. I handed her the letter without a word. Her eyes scanned it, and I watched the hope drain out of her expression. "But they approved these. You have the email." "The signed document," she said, almost to herself. I nodded slowly. "They don't care, Sarah. They're saying the approval was a clerical error and that I should have known better. They're fining us anyway." That night, neither of us slept. Sarah kept replaying the conversation she wanted to have. With them, a mix of disbelief and outrage. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about the $12,000 money we didn't have. The loan for the windows had already been a stretch. We'd budgeted for years to finally replace the cracked, drafty old ones. The new windows had brought warmth to the house, made winters bearable. And now, this. The next morning, I called the HOA office. After being placed on hold for 26 minutes, a flat, disinterested voice finally answered. It was Barbara, the HOA president. She didn't even try to hide her smugness. "Mr. Thompson, I understand this is upsetting for you, but rules are rules. You should have double-checked before making changes." I clenched the phone tighter. "Barbara, I did check. You signed the approval yourself." She chuckled. Actually chuckled before saying, "Well, I guess we all make mistakes. Unfortunately, you'll have to pay the fine." I hung up before I said something I'd regret, but inside, I was seething. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering every scrap of proof I had, the signed approval, contractor's receipts, even the email chain with the HOA's architectural committee. I wrote letters, filed appeals, and attended to HOA meetings, where they smugly shut me down in front of my neighbors. Barbara even had the nerve to say, "We can't make exceptions for everyone who feels wronged." When the deadline hit, they placed a lien on my home, a lien over windows they had approved. That's when Sarah broke down in the kitchen, sobbing into her hands. "We worked so hard for this house. How can they just take it from us?" I pulled her close, promising I'd fix it somehow, even though I didn't believe it myself. The lien forced us to take a second mortgage just to get them off our backs. For the next 5 years, we lived lean, no vacations. No new clothes unless absolutely necessary. Every spare dollar going toward paying off the debt they'd shackled us with. I watched Sarah's light dim bit by bit, her laugh becoming rare, her eyes carrying a quiet heaviness. I started taking extra shifts, leaving before sunrise and coming home long after dark. My kids grew older in those years, and I missed more moments than I cared to admit, but I never forgot. Every time I passed the HOA clubhouse, every time I saw Barbara's shiny SUV parked in her driveway, I remembered what they'd done. I kept my documents. I kept my anger. I kept my promise to myself, to Sarah, that someday they would pay. That someday came in a way I never could have predicted. It started with a rumor from a neighbor about a development deal the HOA was desperate to close. They needed a key property, a small strip of land, to get approval for a major project worth hundreds of thousands. And guess who owned that strip of land? Me, the same useless little plot behind my backyard that I'd inherited when the developer abandoned it years ago. I didn't say a word at first. I just waited. I watched, and when the HOA finally came knocking, it was Barbara herself at my door, smiling like a politician on campaign day. "Mr. Thompson," she began, "we'd like to make you an offer." I could feel my heart pounding. After 5 years, I finally had them where I wanted them. Barbara's smile was the same one she wore at HOA meetings when she wanted to appear friendly, stretched too wide, showing too many teeth, but with eyes that never softened. She stood on my porch holding a folder, and I swear I could smell her perfume before she even spoke again. "This piece of land you own, it's important to a project we're working on. We'd like to purchase it from you." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "And why's that?" I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over her shoulder like she didn't want the neighbors hearing. "It's just part of a development deal. Nothing major. We just want to tidy up some boundaries." That was the first lie of the day. The second came when she opened her folder and slid a paper toward me. "We're willing to offer you $8,000 for the lot." It's generous, considering it's not worth much to anyone else. I looked down at the offer and nearly laughed. She was trying to play me like a fool. "You're right," I said slowly. "It's not worth much to anyone but you." Barbara's smile twitched. "Excuse me?" I stepped forward just enough to see her flinch. "Barbara, I know exactly what this land is worth to you. You need it for that big waterfront expansion project you've been whispering about for the last year. I know you can't get county approval without it. I also know you stand to make a lot of money from that deal personally." Her face paled for a moment before she recovered. "Mr. Thompson, I think you've misunderstood. This isn't I." Cut her off. "Save it. You've got 2 options. Walk away now, or pay me what it's actually worth." I could feel the years of anger rising in my chest like fire every sleepless night. Every overtime shift. Every tear Sarah cried in that kitchen. And by the way, that price. It's not going to be $8 grand. It's going to be $1,000. Her jaw dropped. "That's absurd. No one will pay that for a useless strip of land." I shrugged. "Then I guess your little project dies right here." She stared at me for a long moment, clearly calculating. Then she huffed, gathering her papers back into her folder. "We'll be in touch," she said sharply, before stomping off my porch. I watched her go, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time in years, I was holding the cards. Over the next 2 weeks, things got interesting. HOA board members I'd barely spoken to before suddenly stopped by just to chat. Neighbors who had ignored me during the window fiasco now asked about my kids. I knew Barbara had sent them. She was trying to butter me up through other people. But I didn't bite. One evening, I came home from work to find Sarah in the kitchen again, but this time she was smiling. "You're going to love this," she said, holding up her phone. She'd been scrolling through the county's public project filings. That expansion deal. The HOA already signed contracts with the developer. They've got 30 days to secure all property rights or the deal falls apart. And they're on the hook for penalties if it fails. I couldn't help it. I grinned. So they don't just want my land, they need it. The next HOA meeting was 2 days later. I showed up early, sat in the back, and listened as Barbara tried to keep her cool while the developer himself stood in the corner, looking like he'd swallowed a lemon. I could see the tension in her shoulders when she caught me watching. When the meeting ended, she made a beeline for me. "Mr. Thompson," she said, in that overly sweet tone, "I've reconsidered your offer. $75,000 is steep, but perhaps we can meet somewhere in the middle." I shook my head. No middle. 5 or nothing. Her composure cracked for just a second, enough for me to see the panic beneath. "You're holding this project hostage." "No," I said quietly. "I'm holding you accountable." When I walked out of that clubhouse, I could feel every set of eyes on me. I knew the gossip would start before I even made it home. But I didn't care. I had waited 5 years for this moment. I wasn't about to settle for anything less than justice. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have imagined, was how far Barbara was willing to go to try and crush me before she paid up. And just how messy this was about to get. 2 days later, the storm began. It started with a certified letter taped to my front door. Big, bold HOA letterhead at the top and in the middle, a notice of violation. They claimed my fence was too tall and my shed visibly deteriorating. I stood there on my porch, holding the letter, my pulse hammering in my ears. The fence was the same height it had been for a decade. The shed freshly painted last spring. It was a joke. No, it was a warning. I didn't even bother calling Barbara. I knew exactly what she was doing. If she couldn't get me to sell that strip of land cheap, she'd try to bury me under fines until I caved. Sarah found me standing at the kitchen counter, rereading the letter with a tight jaw. "What now?" she asked, already sounding exhausted. I handed it to her. She shook her head. "She's coming for you, James." I nodded slowly. "Let her try." That week, 3 more violations appeared in my mailbox. Grass too long. Trash bins visible from the street. Unapproved decorative lights. The same lights we'd had up for 5 Christmases without a word from anyone. Each notice came with a fine. By Friday, they claimed I owed $2,300 in penalties. Then came the real hit, a formal threat to place another lien on my home. If T didn't pay within 30 days, Sarah wanted me to fight it immediately, to get a lawyer to go to the county. But I told her to wait. If she's desperate enough to pull this now, she's running out of time. We just have to make sure she can't touch us legally before her deadline runs out. So I did what I should have done years ago. I called a real estate attorney. Not just any attorney, but the same one who had represented a group of homeowners who'd successfully sued Barbara 2 years earlier for misuse of HOA funds. When I explained my situation, he didn't hesitate. "Sounds like retaliation. If you've got documentation and it sounds like you do, we can shut this down fast." Within a week, the attorney sent Barbara a letter that could have cut glass. It spelled out every violation of HOA rules she had committed against me, including conflict of interest and abuse of authority. It warned that if she didn't cease immediately, we'd not only file for damages, but also report her to the state HOA Regulatory Board. And just like that, silence. No more violations, no more letters. But Barbara wasn't done. She just switched tactics. I started noticing unfamiliar cars parked near my property, people taking photos of my backyard. One afternoon, a man in a suit approached while I was mowing the lawn, claiming he was from the county planning office and needed to inspect the land I owned. When I asked for his ID, he got cagey. Turned out he wasn't from the county at all. He was a surveyor hired by the HOA to dig up dirt. They were scrambling. I could feel it. And the clock was ticking on the 20th day of their 30-day deadline. Barbara herself showed up again, but this time her confidence was gone. She was pale, tense, her lips pressed tight. "Mr. Thompson," she said, without even a fake smile, "let's discuss your price." I leaned against the porch post, pretending to think it over. "Still $75,000, I said simply. Her shoulders sagged. "Fine." I didn't speak. I just waited. "Finally," she added, "we'll need you to sign the transfer paperwork." At the HOA office, I shook my head. "No, Barbara. We'll do this at my attorney's office, and you'll bring a certified check. No payment plans. No delays. She didn't argue, which told me just how bad things had gotten for her. As she walked away, I realized something. She'd underestimated me from the start. She'd thought I was the same man who'd caved 5 years ago, the man who'd let her take $12,000 and a piece of my pride. She didn't see that those years had turned me into someone who'd learned exactly how to wait for the right moment to strike. But the thing about revenge, it's never as simple as getting what you're owed. Sometimes the other side tries to make you bleed one last time before you win. And Barbara still had one more card to play. The day before we were set to meet at my attorney's office, I woke up to the sound of Sarah screaming my name from the driveway. I bolted outside barefoot, heart pounding, and saw her standing by my truck. Every single tire had been slashed. Deep, clean cuts, professional work. I didn't need to guess who had done it. No one in this neighborhood touched each other's property unless it was personal. And Barbara. She had motive written all over her smug face. Sarah's hands were shaking as she pointed to the note, tucked under my windshield wiper. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. In neat block letters, it read, "We always find a way to win." I took the note and crumpled it in my fist. My teeth clenched so tight my jaw hurt. "She's trying to rattle me," I said. Sarah looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "James, this isn't just about rattling you. She's trying to push you into snapping so she can use it against you. Don't give her the satisfaction." I called the police, filed a vandalism report, and gave them the note. They couldn't prove it was her. No fingerprints, no camera footage from nearby homes, but the officer promised to keep an eye out. I knew it wouldn't go anywhere. Barbara was too smart to get caught directly. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the last 5 years in my mind, every humiliation, every lie, every smirk she'd given me across the HOA table. And now, with the deal in my hands, she'd stooped to slashing tires like a petty criminal. It was almost funny, if it didn't make my blood boil. The next afternoon, I walked into my attorney's office with my head high. Barbara was already there, sitting stiffly in the corner with a man I recognized as the HOA's treasurer. On the desk between us sat a thick stack of paperwork and a certified envelope. "Mr. Thompson," my attorney greeted, "we're here to finalize the sale. The HOA will transfer payment upon signing." Barbara's voice was clipped, her eyes cold. "Let's just get this over with." I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and said, "Before I sign, we need to address one thing. The $2,300 in bogus fines you sent me last month. You're going to rescind those in writing, and you're going to send that letter to the county to clear my record." Her lips thinned. "That has nothing to do with this transaction." I glanced at my attorney, who simply said, "Actually, it does, because Mr. Thompson won't be signing until all terms are agreed upon." Barbara's treasurer shifted uncomfortably. "Barbara, just do it. We're out of time." Her eyes burned into mine, but she picked up her pen and scribbled her signature on the rescission letter my attorney had prepared in advance. Only then did I sign over the deed to the useless strip of land. The treasurer slid the certified envelope across the desk. My attorney opened it, counted the check, and handed it to me. $75,000 real. Tangible proof that for once the HOA had lost as I stood to leave. Barbara muttered, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I turned to her, calm as ice. "Oh, I will. Every single day. Because every time I look at this check, I'll remember the woman who thought she could break me and ended up signing my victory instead." Outside, Sarah was waiting in the car. When I showed her the check, she let out a shaky laugh that turned into tears. "It's over," she whispered. But I knew it wasn't. Not really. Barbara had been embarrassed in front of her board, her developer, and likely half the neighborhood by now. People like her didn't just forget. And deep down, I had the uneasy feeling that this battle, the one I thought I'd finally won, might just be the opening act. The first week after the deal felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. Sarah and I paid off the last of the second mortgage, cleared the credit cards, and even put a down payment on the family vacation we'd promised the kids 5 summers ago. For the first time in forever, I could sit on the back porch with my coffee and not feel like a noose was tightening around my neck. But peace has a way of feeling temporary. When you've dealt with someone like Barbara, it was the third Sunday morning after the sale when the first ripple hit. I was reading the paper at the kitchen table when Sarah walked in holding her phone, her face pale. "You need to see this," she said. She handed me a link to the neighborhood Facebook group, a place I avoided because it was basically a gossip war zone. And there it was, a post from one of my neighbors, complete with a photo of my house and the caption, "Some people will sell out their community for a quick buck. Guess integrity doesn't mean much to everyone." The comments were brutal. Half of them from people I'd never even spoken to, parroting lies about how I'd blackmailed the HOA and sabotaged a project that would have benefited everyone. I didn't need a crystal ball to know where it started. Barbara had found her revenge in the court of public opinion. Sarah was furious. "You should post the truth. Show them the documents. Tell them what she did to us." But I shook my head. That's exactly what she wants. If I jump into the mud with her, I'll come out dirty too. We'll just let them talk. Easier said than done. For the next 2 weeks, the cold shoulders started piling up. Neighbors who used to wave at me when I walked the dog suddenly turned their backs. The family 2 houses down who'd once invited us to every barbecue stopped making eye contact, even at the grocery store. I caught whispers when I walked by. Then came the kicker, a letter from the county tax assessor's office. My property was being revaluated due to recent neighborhood complaints. I didn't need to guess who had filed them. Sure enough, when my attorney looked into it, he found they were anonymous, but matched the timeline perfectly with Barbara's smear campaign. "She's pushing you," my attorney said over the phone, "trying to make life uncomfortable enough that you move. That's how she wins the war she lost in the deal." But I wasn't moving. Not after what she'd already taken from me. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday evening. I was locking up the garage when I saw headlights pull into my driveway. It wasn't Sarah or the kids. They were still at Sarah's sister's for dinner. A black sedan idled there for a moment before the driver's window rolled down. It was Mark Jensen, one of the HOA board members who had barely spoken to me during the land negotiations. He leaned out, glancing nervously toward the street. "We need to talk," he said. I hesitated. "About what?" He looked over his shoulder. "Again, about Barbara. She's not as untouchable as she thinks. And I think you'd like to hear what I know." I stepped closer, the reins slicking my hair. "Why, tell me." Mark's jaw tightened. "Because she's done to me what she did to you, and I'm done playing her games." That's when he told me something I hadn't seen coming, something that would turn the quiet satisfaction of my $75,000 payday into the first step of a much bigger fight. A fight that might finally end Barbara's reign for good. Mark waited until I got into the passenger seat before he spoke again, his windshield wipers slicing through the rain like a nervous tick. His hands gripped the steering wheel tight, and he kept glancing in the mirrors, like he expected Barbara herself to appear out of the shadows. "She's been skimming money from the HOA for years." "Hey," he said quietly, like the car itself might be bugged. I frowned. "That's a big accusation." Mark nodded. "I know, but I've seen the books. I'm the treasurer for the landscaping committee, which means I have access to certain invoices. Barbara reroutes payments, says they're for maintenance or special assessments, but the numbers don't match the actual work done. She pads them, then funnels the difference into accounts connected to her husband's construction company." I stared at him, rain tapping against the window in a steady rhythm. "Why are you telling me this?" "'Cause she burned me," he said, his voice tightening. "Last month, I caught a $14,000 discrepancy in the budget. When I confronted her, she threatened to have my family's business audited. Said she'd find something to ruin me, and she can. She's done it before." I thought about Sarah, about the $12,000 fine that had nearly broken us, about the lies, the smear campaign. My jaw clenched. "So what are you proposing?" Mark leaned in slightly. "We take her down, quietly but completely. I'll give you copies of the documents. You pass them to someone who can make them matter, a reporter, an investigator. She goes down, we clean the board, and you get your neighborhood back." It was tempting, too tempting. But I'd played this game long, enough to know it wouldn't be easy. "If this blows back on me, she'll come after my family twice as hard," I warned. Mark's eyes met mine. "If we do nothing, she keeps doing it to other people. And you already know she won't stop with you." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about the years she'd stolen from me, the debt, the shame, the quiet anger that had lived in our home like an unwelcome guest. Then I thought about the $75,000 check sitting in our safe, the one thing she hadn't been able to twist into a loss. "All right," I said finally. "But we do this smart." Over the next week, Mark funneled me copies of invoices, bank statements, and internal HOA emails that should never have left their servers. I kept everything locked in a fireproof box in my garage, scanning digital copies to a hidden cloud account only I could access. When I had enough, I made a call, not to a reporter, but to a state investigator I'd been referred to by my attorney. During the land deal, the man listened quietly as I explained, occasionally asking questions, but mostly letting me talk. By the time I finished, he sounded almost amused. "You've just handed me a fraud case on a silver platter," he said. "Give me a week." It didn't take that long. 4 days later, Barbara's SUV was parked outside her house when 2 unmarked cars pulled up. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, as 3 men in suits and 1 woman in a county badge walked up to her door. The conversation was brief, too brief for pleasantries, before they walked her back to the cars. She wasn't in handcuffs, but her face told me everything. Sarah walked in just as the cars pulled away. "What's going on?" she asked, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth sink in. "Justice," I said simply. The neighborhood was buzzing within an hour. People who hadn't spoken to me in months were suddenly curious, stopping by to see how we were doing and share what they'd heard. The Facebook group was on fire, half defending Barbara, half already picking apart her reputation. Like vultures, by evening, I got a call from Mark. "They've frozen the HOA accounts," he said, unable to hide the satisfaction in his voice. "We're holding an emergency meeting tomorrow to vote her out as president." For the first time in 5 years, I felt like the weight on my chest had truly lifted. Barbara had taken so much from me, but this time I hadn't just won 4. Myself, I'd made sure she couldn't hurt anyone else again, or so I thought, because the next morning, before the emergency meeting, an envelope appeared on my porch. No return address, just my name written in careful block letters. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and on it, 6 words that made my stomach drop. "You've made a very dangerous enemy." I stared at the paper for a long time, the words blurring in my vision. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And it wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name to feel the cold weight of who it came from. Even stripped of her title, Barbara still had claws. Sarah came into the kitchen, hair damp from her morning shower, and saw the paper in my hands. "What is it?" she asked, her voice cautious, like she already knew it wasn't good. I handed it to her. She read it once, then twice, before looking up at me with fear in her eyes. "James, what if she's serious? What if she tries something else?" "She will," I said simply. People like her don't go quietly. But we faced her before, and we'll face her again. The emergency HOA meeting that afternoon was something I'll never forget. For the first time, Barbara wasn't at the head of the table. She wasn't even in the room. The vice president opened by confirming her resignation, and then Mark stood up, clearing his throat. I think we need to talk about rebuilding trust in this community, he began, glancing at me in the back of the room. What's happened over the last few years has hurt a lot of people, and it's time we put that behind us. It was a diplomatic way of saying Barbara destroyed this place, and we're done letting it happen. When the meeting ended, few neighbors approached me, the same ones who'd looked through me weeks earlier. We didn't know the whole story, one woman said, almost embarrassed. Another man nodded toward me. Glad you stuck it to her. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But it was the start of something. That night, I took the $75,000 check from the safe. I hadn't cashed it yet. Part of me wanted to hold it a little longer, like a trophy. But now, as I looked at it, I realized it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about closure, about finally taking something back from the years she'd stolen. The next morning, I went to the bank. The teller smiled as she processed the deposit, sliding the receipt across the counter. Big payday, she said cheerfully. 5 years in the making, I replied. Walking out of the bank, I felt lighter. The fight was over, at least the one that mattered. Barbara could send her little threats, could stew in whatever anger she had left, but she no longer had power here. She was just another bitter neighbor with no authority, watching from the sidelines as the community moved on without her. That night, Tara and I sat on the back porch, a warm summer breeze carrying the smell of her jasmine plants. She rested, her head on my shoulder. Feels different, she said quietly. It is different, I told her. We're free. And maybe somewhere out there, Barbara was still plotting, still nursing her bruised ego. But as I looked out over my yard, the same house they'd tried to take from me, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what she tried next, she'd never take my peace again. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't the victory itself. It's the life you get to live after you've already won.